If you want to truly scale an organization, you have got to get out of the way.
Hey, welcome back to the show. I have another great guest with me today, Ryan Hogan with Talent Harbor. Ryan, welcome to the show.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Brad.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to dive into some important topics, some fun topics about recruiting and sales. Before we get into all that, give us a little bit of background about Ryan, where you've been, what you've been up to, and basically where you're at today.
Yeah. So for me, I've had this weird kind of like dual trajectory professional track. I enlisted in the U.S. Navy in 2002. I was a helicopter crewman for about 10 years. Got picked up for a commissioning program. Went and drove ships for a few years. And then I've been in the reserves now since, I think it was 2017. So 23 years and counting, and doing some really interesting things on the military side. And there's been this constant like tension in my life of like military and entrepreneurship, and like, you know, a purpose and a calling to serve, to lead, and then also to create value on this planet. I think my story can be summed up as a lot of failures and a couple wins. And that's pretty much been the journey. So the first company that had some sort of traction was a company called Run for Your Lives. It was a zombie-infested 5K obstacle course race. Nice. We scaled it nationwide. Basically, we learned everything of like what not to do. I hired all my best friends. I couldn't spell P&L. Like, you name it, like that was it. And as quick as that grew, it failed, and it failed miserably, and it failed publicly. And at that point, I made myself a promise and just said, if I'm ever fortunate enough to find product market fit again, I'm going to become a learner. So I'm going to surround myself with people that have been there. They've done that. I'm going to find a system and a framework. I'm going to learn finance and some of those other things that come along with it. Second company that found some real scale called Hunt a Killer. It was an immersive murder mystery experience. And what was great was, one, it allowed me to separate from active duty service into the reserves. So I got to continue serving, but I also got to follow my passion and dreams to build something. And we grew. And we grew fast. And that was $0 to $55 million over 6 years. It was a group of peers in a community called Vistage. It was something called EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System. Implementing all of these things and having those soundboards really helped us mitigate the errors that I didn't learn on the first one as we kind of scaled through. And then today, it's talent acquisition. And this was really born out of Hunt a Killer. So as we were going through the sale process, we had about 3 horses in the race, and my Vistage chair business coach pulled me aside, and he was like, "Hey kid, you're not going to be able to sit still. Go pick your favorite line item and go do that for a while." For me, it was people, the investment, development, coaching, mentoring, everything people related. But we spent about $1 million on recruiting, and the industry just never made sense to me. And so I found an opportunity and insert Talent Harbor, where we go out and we bolt on expert recruiting for companies where expert recruiting has generally been inaccessible because of, you know, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 per hire.
Awesome. Well, there's a lot of stuff to unpack in there. First off, thank you for your service. I appreciate that. I don't know if you know this or not. I was actually in the Marines. And so
let's go.
Very familiar with the Navy, obviously.
Yeah.
One of my favorite aircraft is the CH-53, which you were a mechanic on, right?
And not only was I a mechanic, but I was an air crewman. So
nice.
Back in 2002, you had to have a rate. So my rate at that point was an aircraft mechanic, but I was an air crewman. So if I was on the flight schedule, I'd be flying. And if I wasn't on the flight schedule, I'd be fixing the engines. But yeah, we had 53s.
Yeah, I love them. Don't they have 2 crewmen on the 53s?
Minimum was generally 1. We would have 2 because you'd always have someone on long cord, and then you would have somebody, a crew chief in the back, kind of running around doing stuff. The interesting part about the Navy side is the primary mission. So the Marines, the primary mission is heavy lift and transport. Right. For the Navy, the primary mission was mine countermeasures. And so basically we would put a whole bunch of equipment into the back of the helicopter, and we would have anywhere from 5 to 7 air crewmen in the back. And we would be pushing this equipment out the back of the helicopter, get the equipment on a tow boom, and we would drag that equipment through the water, either searching or neutralizing mines.
I gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I just remember flying on those things. They were a blast. I mean, the power to weight ratio on those are absolutely insane.
And like, if it's not leaking, then it's empty. So like you want some sort of oil dripping on you, because if it's not, you've got bigger issues.
Yeah, there was the same. The other one was the 46s. The Marines had the CH-46s, and it was like, if it's not leaking hydraulic fluid, you don't get on that aircraft.
That's exactly right. And it's a true statement.
Yeah, no, I love that. No, I did a 6-month deployment on the USS Duluth, if you're familiar with that ship.
What year was this?
This was in 1999.
Interesting.
It got decommissioned.
Duluth. Okay, that's why. I was going to say it's so unfamiliar that I bet you it's been decomp by now.
Oh yeah. Well, the funny thing was like it was from the Vietnam era. It was an LPD and it was from the Vietnam era. They basically retrofitted it for our deployment, and then like 2 deployments later they decommissioned it because it was a big pile of crap essentially. And
yeah, I bet you've got some great stories. Were you on an ARG? Like, was it a part of like a full amphibious readiness group, 3 ships?
Yeah, it was a Muse. They call it Muse, Marine Expeditionary Unit. Yeah, I did a 6-month deployment over to the Persian Gulf area. It was with the 15th Muse. So we had the Essex, the USS Essex was the mothership. And then we had the Anchorage and the Duluth were the 2 LPDs in that group.
You and I have many shared memories because I was on LSD, so I was a part of the ARG when I started driving ships. So you and I probably have shared memories of just doing circles in the NAG or the SAG, wherever we were, back then, but just doing circles for 6 months, waiting for something to happen.
Well, interesting story about that is that when we were on deployment, we went to the Persian Gulf and we went into Kuwait, did some training. This was during peacetime, and we were doing some training. We get back on the ship, we're going home, we're supposed to stop in Australia. Like, I mean, who doesn't want to go to Australia, right? And so we get like 3 days out of the Strait of Hormuz, get the call, it's like, no, you got to go back. Saddam just kicked all the UN inspectors out of Iraq and you got to go back. So we go back. We end up sitting on the ship for 60 days straight. And then we just sit there waiting and waiting and waiting. And then like the last minute, he lets them back in. Okay, everything's cool. You can go on home now. And then we had to go straight home. We had to pass Australia. So everyone was not happy with that whole event.
Did you at least get the surf and turf? It's like every time there's going to be bad news, the surf and turf is coming.
We call them steel beach parties. So we had, you rated your 2 beers because it was 30 days twice. So 60 days without port. So we got 2 beers each.
Did you get tickets? Is that how?
Good times.
Is that how you would get your beers? Because we used to steal other people's tickets. You'd be like, hey, you going to use that one?
Well, I sold mine. I didn't drink beer, so I sold my 2 tickets.
I love it. This is awesome.
All right, let's get into some actual helpful stuff. Oh, one other thing I was going to ask you. The Hunter Killer, was that like a board game type thing or like a mail-in? What was that?
Yeah, so we started as a live event. There's a longer story here. I'll give you the short version, which is the live event just didn't scale. But we took our experience from Run for Your Lives, and live events was all we knew. But we couldn't have thousands of people standing around a fake crime scene. And so we found product market fit through the live experience. And then we said, well, what other business model exist for us to be able to actually have a scalable business? And this was back in 2016, 17. So think like Loot Crate, Birchbox, all these like subscription box companies were popping up. And so that's what we did is we launched a subscription, and basically we would send clues, items, correspondence, police reports, case files each month episodically, 6 episodes in a season. That business scaled from 0 to about 48 million. And then we were able to layer in, actually during the pandemic, we were able to layer in retail distribution. So like today, if you went to Target or Walmart today, you would see Hunt a Killer. I think they got like 6 SKUs right now at Target. But yeah, it's an adult tabletop board, not board game, but adult tabletop game.
Well, I'm pretty sure I looked into it. I mean, I think I've actually at one time was going to buy it, like the subscription one where it would, mail to you and all that. I don't remember why we didn't do it, but that's cool. I didn't know that. So, all right, construction, growing businesses. I know you focus a lot in the sales and recruiting aspect of it. When you're working with a new contractor, maybe they're hiring their first salesperson. Right. They don't have one now. They're going to hire their first salesperson. What do you see as like common problems, common misconceptions around that whole experience?
Great question. And there's really kind of 2 things that we find pretty consistently. The first is an organization cannot hire effectively if they don't know why they exist. And it's very easy for a construction company to say, well, we exist to build homes or we exist to build commercial properties, whatever the case may be. Generally, the purpose of a company goes much deeper than just, putting paint on the walls or putting up structures. And there's a lot of things that kind of fall into that purpose and that vision. The other thing is, like, why do we exist? And what are the core values inside of the organization that drive the success? What are those core behaviors that help people make decisions, that help them take action? And those things have absolutely got to be identified. And so like if we get a new client and they're coming through our process our first question is, are you operating on EOS or some sort of system that has all of these things documented in one place? And if they don't, then we will actually run an exercise with them to help them understand what their core values are. Because what we see and what I've experienced every time that I've gotten hiring wrong in the past at any of my companies, it wasn't because I can't read a resume. You can read a resume, you'll know immediately if they've got the experience, the expertise. You ask them some questions and then you call their references and you're like, hey, this person's good. Over 50% of the time, the reason somebody gets fired or doesn't work out in an organization is because their core values as a human, their core behaviors as an individual do not match the core behaviors of the organization. So number one, a pretty big friction point up front is this notion of core values, identifying them, understanding them, living and breathing them. And then two is when folks say, hey, I need to go hire a salesperson, it generally what happens is they'll find a competitor company or they'll just go and Google it or they'll plug it in ChatGPT and they'll say, I need a salesperson, and it'll spit out a job description. That's not an effective way. Every single company is different. Every single company is measuring different things, different targets, different growth trajectory, different clients, different value proposition. And so it's important in detail to first understand what do we actually need here? And spending the time to understand what does success look like will help you understand what exactly you need. So number one, someone comes in, they don't share the core values. Number two, you brought in a rock star, but that's not actually what you needed was that specific competency. You needed something all else.
Yeah, that's great. I was going to ask you this earlier. I actually forgot. Are you familiar with Mike Matalone with XP3 Talent?
No, I'll check it out.
Okay. Well, no, he was on my podcast. Actually, his episode just dropped Monday, but he talked about Visage. And that was the first time I actually ever heard about it. And so you brought it up too. And I was like, oh, I wonder if it's a small community and maybe they know each other. He does more he'll put hiring systems in your business. He'll come in and actually set up a system for hiring and training and retaining. Anyways, yeah, the core values. I did a workshop earlier this year on core values, creating your core values. It's one of those things that rough and tough contractors think it's that, foo-foo things that you do. And it's no, that's... Yeah. It's so important to your business.
Yeah, it is. And there's two common things that we've seen. The one that you just talked about, which is this idea of woo-woo, we don't need core values. We roll up our sleeves and we pick up the hammer and we go in there and we get the job done. And that's good. That's needed. But you also need to understand what makes a human tick, what makes this organization tick, and making sure that all of those things align. The other kind of extreme case that we see as well is they've got it and they'll put it up on their walls and people look at it and pass it, but they never talk about it. And once you have core values, it is the organization. You need to hire, you need to fire, and you need to talk about them. And not just saying integrity is our number one core value. What does integrity mean? It means you're honest and dependable and whatever else you may throw in there. That's not it. Something that we've been doing is since my Hunt to Killer days is we get the entire team together once a week for 30 minutes. And we talk about a lot of fun things and what's happening and where we're going, and we get everybody excited. The second thing that we do is we go over our core values. And what I'll do is I will call somebody out for a decision or an action or something that they accomplished inside the organization. And I will tie that vignette to an actual core value, because what we're trying to do is paint a picture for everybody in the organization. So it's not just, oh, I see the words. It's, I know what that looks like in action.
Well, and then you also have, like you said, you got, the companies that have the stuff plastered everywhere, but then the owner basically does the opposite, right? It's, that's for you, not for me. Yeah. Why do you even have the core values if the owner, or maybe that's the owner's son or somebody, that gets away with that, and how toxic that is in the, the team as far as keeping it all cohesive, because then it's, you're talking out one side of your mouth and doing something out the other.
I heard a great quote and I'm going to butcher it. But it's an organization is as good as what it tolerates. And it's brilliant because and you're talking about this idea of leading by example. And it's that's the worst of the worst, which is if the leader's not embracing the core values or not, it's not them, then something is majorly broken. And then the other side of that is when things inside, when the workers aren't following the core values, but the organization or their leaders or the top leader looks the other way, doesn't call it out, doesn't hire and fire based upon those core values, they're meaningless. And that's, to your point, like, not only do you have to identify them, but they have to be true. And everybody has to, it's not abide by them, because to a certain extent, it's who you are. It's how you're made. A person that is successful at Zappos, where, you know, they're all about customer experience and like everybody's like got great vibes and great energy, they get work done and they're effective. But that same human might not be all that great at Amazon or at Tesla or some other culture where it's like, you know, all we care about here is performance and results. And if you're not hitting the mark, then you're gone. One's not right or wrong, but the same human will not be successful at both.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I had the conversation with Mike about, you know, if you hire a top talent and then you bring them into a chaotic business, like, they're not going to perform at the same level. They're not going to come in and save your business unless that's what they do, you know, unless they're actually out there creating the processes and they enjoy that aspect of it. But more times than not, they just come in, they fall flat on their face, or they struggle because you haven't gave them all the tools and resources they need. And then everyone's upset about it.
Yep. I couldn't agree more. And that's a part of high turnover. Like, if an organization has high turnover, if an organization is like hemorrhaging talent, especially if it's like new talent, if new talent comes in and they turn around and walk out the door within 90 days, like, something was broke there. Expectations weren't aligned up front. They were oversold on the opportunity. You didn't pick the right candidate, but like, something is broke if those things are happening.
In regards to like the core values, I know there's guys that are like, oh, I need core values. Okay, ChatGPT, what are some core values that, you know, that are important, right? And it's like integrity, this, and this, but the owner is not really, like, that's not their core values. You know, it's just, it sounds good. And so you get that, I'm doing it because Brad told me I needed to have core values and put it on the wall. And so I'm doing that, but I really don't believe in any of that. It's just it's just one thing I'm doing because somebody said to do it. Like you said, it has to be like in your blood. Like it is you and how you believe, how you live, all of that stuff.
And generally speaking, and so like I've been running on EOS, all my businesses on EOS. And this is kind of a part of that type of framework. Generally what happens is that the core values of an organization, especially in the early days. So like, think like $0 to $1 million, maybe even like $1 million up to 5 to 10 million. The core values of the organization is like the same core values of the founder or of the CEO. And that's okay. Like, because that's kind of what you need. Like, if the tone's being set at the top and like, this is how you think, this is how you believe, like, you need to get other people that can get on that bus and go wherever you're going with you. Because the minute that those things are untrue, or you start bringing in people that don't fit, like, that becomes problematic. And so to your point, like, the owner should take time to sit down and say, like, what are my personal beliefs? What are my core values? What makes me tick? Because naturally that's going to be the organization's core values until you get to a point in which you have a, senior leadership team of 6 people, and you're running this process with all of the leaders, and you're kind of evolving. You're not like totally changing. You're not going from, integrity to frauds, like that. You're not going to that degree, but you are starting to evolve it, because now you have an organization with a bunch of people that have like varying degrees. So anyhow, long-winded, I agree with you. And it's such an important exercise.
Yeah. Back to what you said earlier about, getting the right fit. I'm sure you've read it, The Ideal Team Player. I mean, when I read that book, it broke my brain about understanding how you hire, how you create culture in your business. I still want to hit, hungry, humble, and smart, his 3 things that they wanted. I kind of stole that because I agree with that too. And I put it into a job posting one time, and I had a guy apply for a lead carpenter position. And he said, what attracted me is because you put in there humble, hungry, and smart. And those are values that I also have. Right. And so when that happened, like, light bulbs go off, like, holy crap, this stuff does matter. It's so hard to ingrain, and maybe you have some tips for these guys, for clients, but when you're hiring someone, we're always looking to fill a position based on that position and skill, but we don't think about the character side of it, which is so important, right? The culture fit and all that. Is it better to hire someone that has the perfect culture fit, but doesn't really have the skill set? I'm talking about when you're trying to hire for a skilled position. If it's a laborer, it doesn't really matter. if it's a skilled position, a salesperson, a project manager, a foreman, someone that's, you need somebody who knows what they're doing. I mean, where's the balance? Like, do I go all culture, a little bit of skill? Do I try to get both? Like, where is that perfect fit?
So, and this is just my own personal view. This is like the way that I hire. I wouldn't force my opinion on anybody else. 100% of times I will look at the culture fit all day long. To your point of like, the hungry, humble, what was the last one?
Smart.
Hungry, humble, and smart. You can teach anybody that is hungry, that is humble, and that is smart. What that tells me immediately is that they are a learner. And learners you can train learners.
Hey, just a quick time out from the show. If you're a frustrated contractor who's dealing with low profit margins, stuck working on the tools every day, or doing free estimates for people who are never going to hire you in the first place, I invite you to my private contractor community, the Profit Club, where contractors just like you are adding 2 to 3 times more profit each year without producing any more jobs, and finally getting completely off the tools to never do another free estimate again. So if you're ready to increase your profits, stop doing free estimates, and get off the tools, then all you have to do is click the link in the show notes to learn more about the Profit Club and see how it can easily 2 to 3 times the cash in your pocket, give you a proven sales process that will convert more jobs with ease and get you off the tools once and for all. And the best part is you can do all of this without having to produce more jobs than you currently are. Click the link to learn more. Now let's get back to the show.
The problem is when they don't fit the core values, they're stuck in their own ways. I think I was having a conversation a couple of weeks ago, and it was like adding a new employee to an organization is like a foreign object inside of the body, and there's going to be like some sort of thing that happens. Like, you hope the body doesn't reject it, but at the end of the day, like every single time, like it's gonna shift, it's gonna change the culture in some way. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to change it constantly for the better. You're trying to improve the organization. And all day long, I would take a learner over someone with the actual skill sets. Now, that's not to say that like they can't have any experience in that, because depending upon how fast you're growing and like, do you have time to, train them up for a year? Probably not. But like, checking the block. Do they have some of the experience? Do they have some of the skill sets? Are they learners? Let's go.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. It's the same thing. I always say, hire for character, train for skill. That's convenient to say sometimes, but when you need a lead carpenter, like you need somebody that knows some skills, right? You tend to start having like guys start kind of backing off some of those culture requirements, because it's like, man, I really need to get off the tools, or I really need to replace this lead guy, or whatever it is. And it's a big shift. It's a big change for the owner, right? Especially if the owner's still on the tools, they're hiring someone that's going to replace them. Now is going to run the jobs. That's a big change for the owner. Do you have, when you work with companies, do you have that situation where the owner is like doing a task and now they're going to hire someone to replace them, and there's like this not disconnect, but the owner's having a hard time with the transition of that?
The only way that you can grow a company, because there's a lot of consultants, there's a lot of like fractional leadership. There's a whole bunch of things that you can do in this life where you're not an employee of an organization, but you're adding value, and you're doing so in an independent way. And that's great. And that is 100% okay. If you want to take that, the only way you can scale is by getting out of the way. And so if you have a consultant practice and you're like, I like this, I dig it, great. Like, pick up a few clients, make sure you have a pipeline. And when one client drops, you've got another one to plug in there. Let's say that takes you to $500,000, $1 million. If you want to truly scale an organization, you have got to get out of the way. And that's all about like setting the vision, setting the mission, developing the core values, making sure everybody understands where you're going, and then starting to remove yourself. Like, we call them seats. And on an organizational chart, it would just be like whatever that job title is and where does it sit. And what we see all too often, actually very much in the sales seat, is that like owners generally can sell. Like the reason that they are even in business is because they convinced people that they provide a certain amount of value, and that person is now paying them for the value that they promised. And so generally speaking, like most founders are salespeople. And that means they are sitting in the sales seat. So not only are they in the visionary, maybe the integrator seat or the CEO and president, they're also sitting in the sales seat. maybe they do some of the operational work, so they're also sitting in the operations seat. You've got to start to back out of those things. And you're right. We see that all the time. And it's a struggle for some owners, for some people that are like, well, that's not the way that I would have done it. And there's no easy fix for this, like, because it sets up a disastrous situation, because you could go out and hire the best person, most amazing salesperson ever. But if you don't give them the reins, if you don't get out of their way, they're not going to perform. And then the question would be like, why did you even hire? And so like some of the things that we talk about is things will never be done the exact way that you would have done them. And let's assume that it's true that the way that you would have done it was 100 times better than the way that it was done, or whatever the case may be. So if we assume those things are true, that like when you do it, it's done perfectly, and you add a tremendous amount of value, then what you have to do is you have to say to yourself, I'm willing to accept 85%. Are they going to do it the same exact way I would have done it? No. Do they have the same, like if it's email, do they have the same tone? Are they reaching out to the same people? It's not. But if you're willing to accept 85%, the gains that you will get by removing yourself from that seat so you can focus on other areas of the business are astronomical. Because what you're trying to do as an owner is you're trying to work on the business, not in the business. And so like the first step in that is understanding that like nobody's going to do it 100% the way that you would have done it and be as effective. But if you're willing to say, I acknowledge that, and I'm willing to step 85% because of the tremendous value that I'm going to add in other places in the organization, usually you can have an easier time getting there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've always heard, and I believe it to be true, is like the hardest thing you can do as an owner is give up control. Like just purely give up control, right? Of different aspects of your business. Do you ever work with or have situations where the owner is like, he just wants to do sales and really doesn't want to run day to day? And so now you bring in like a general manager or, some type of CEO or whatever, the owner started it, but they're like, I just want to do sales, or I just want to do operations. I just want to do this or this. And then they build a team around that. I mean, do you have experience working with people with that type of setup?
Yeah. Like one, I have real world experience inside of my own organizations. And so my last company, Hunt a Killer, my co-founder in that. So I'm not a game designer. I'm not an obstacle course race designer. I'm really not a recruiter. Now I've hired people. I've hired hundreds of people, but like I have not honed the craft that is expert recruiting, because recruiting is truly a core competency. When you take somebody from a sales position or you take somebody from the operations and you're also going to go hire for this new role, they are subject matter experts in operations or in sales. They're not subject matter experts in recruiting. And I think all too often we get lost because these tools are readily available. Oh, we'll post a job to LinkedIn. We'll post a job to Indeed. And these tools make it seem like recruiting is easy. It is not. It is one of the hardest things that you can do inside of an organization. And it's generally speaking inaccessible because of how much it costs. And so owners take it upon themselves. A real world example I have of this is my last company, my co-founder, Derek, who is an incredible game designer, storyteller, writer, and I'm not. So I was not the game designer. That was him. And so like when I start businesses, I find a yin and yang, and like I'm a visionary. I'm like, I can spot a problem. I can help put some things together, but I'm not the executioner. I don't deliver on the service or the product. And so I find co-founders like that. Well, when we started growing, naturally two co-founders of a company, we're both kind of sitting at the top. Well, when we started growing and we started to fill in the leadership team, like Derek went into a spot in which was heading product, not running the company, not worrying about finance. All he worried about is, how do I produce the most amazing product the world has ever seen? And that's the best and highest use of his time. Owners that we've dealt with, very similar situations. And we call them integrators. You can call them general managers. You can call them presidents. But when that type of thing is happening, what you want is somebody running the day to day. Because like, if you want to do sales and you are great at sales and that's the best and highest use of your time, one, congratulations, because you had the self-awareness to come out and say like, maybe I'm not the best person to like run the day to day. 100%. Like we can go out, we can find an implementer an integrator, a general manager, someone to come in and make sure that the trains are running on time and things are getting done. And that'll open up the capacity for the owner to go and sell more products.
Yeah. I mean, it's always like it feels like an ego hit whenever you like have to say, I can't do, I don't know what it is. I've had this conversation often, but within the blue collar industry specifically, there's just like this whole ego and pride thing about I built this, and I run this and I own this. My name's on the side of the truck. And there's this whole pride element of it that really, I think, is the Achilles heel for a lot of these guys, because like you said, they can't get out of their own way. They'll drive their business into the ground before they get out of the way and let somebody else come in and take over and do a better job than them.
I see that all day long. I was very fortunate. And so like when I sit here and talk about this, it's going to be like, oh, well, like how did he figure it all out? I stumbled into this idea of like being able to detach from the business. And the reason is because all of the businesses that we've talked about that I've launched so far, I was active duty Navy when I launched those things. And so I had no time or capacity to micromanage everything. So like the only thing I could do is set a vision, hire the right people, and trust that the work was going to get done. And it's never failed me before. And it was like a product of that environment, which has gotten me to where I am today. And the problem is that the companies that will be tremendously successful are led by owners, are led by people that can let go of their ego. And so like, that's kind of the tough love here, where it's like, hey, get it. Like there's a lot of pride in this. And like your name's on the side of the truck, and like all of these things are true. What do you want out of this? Because if you want a nice $1 million business or, $500,000 business and you're happy where you're at today, just keep doing what you're doing, because there's nothing wrong with that. But if someone sits down and thinks about this and they're like, I'm trying to build a $10 million business, you got to get out of the way. You got to drop the ego. And that's just the reality, or you'll never get there. And that's kind of the tough love side to this, is like, you can want all you want, but if you don't get out of the way, the organization is not going to grow, and you become more of a detriment.
Yeah, I see that all the time as well. I mean, granted, not everybody is probably built to be, an entrepreneur, to own a business. I mean, there are some people that are great craftsmen and, they do fantastic work, but they really shouldn't be owning their own business in the capacity of, managing and growing that. Some people should just be subcontractors, where they don't actually have to go out there and, market and talk to clients and all that. They just have one, GC or whatever they work for.
Yeah.
And that's okay too. Like none of these are wrong per se, but I think what I hear you saying is like, you have to first identify what you want out of it, and then make the necessary changes or steps to be able to do that. But I see all the time, I talk to people all the time, and I get on a call with somebody who's interested in getting coaching or getting help. I'm like, what are your goals? What's your revenue goal? And let's say they're at like $300,000 right now. I'm like, cool. Where do you want to be at? I'd like to be at $1 million by, next year. And I'm like, I'm not saying it's not possible, but you're going to be a 95% different company than where you are right now. And it's going to require you to make enormous changes in your, in your life and day-to-day operations. And so most people have, huge ambition, but they don't want to change anything that they're doing to get there.
The absolute biggest unlock that I've had in life, like one, yes, disassociating from the business. Like how I look at business is a vehicle. Business is a vehicle for me to achieve whatever it is that I'm trying to achieve personally. And that allows me to disassociate from the actual business itself, or like what we're doing, to a degree in which it's not my baby. Like this business may look completely different than what I thought, because all I care about is achieving my personal goals. And so if this is a vehicle, then we're going to continue to change things until we get to where we're going. The interesting part about what you just said is like the unlock that I've had in life is finding a partner every single time, which is, you just talked about, what was the first type of person you talked about? Did you say craftsman?
Craftsman, yeah. They're really good, really good with their hands, artistic.
Yeah. So let's say there is a brilliant craftsman out there. What that craftsman needs is somebody like me, because I don't know anything about being a great craftsman, but I feel like I could sell that. Like I feel like I could build a value proposition, build a vision. What is it? Like 100% of zero is zero, but 50% of a $10 million business is quite a bit. Like that's the whole thing. And like one's not better, not worse. Like, Derek was great at the product. I would say that was half the business. Like, yes, we got to figure out how to sell it. We got to figure out how to do it. But half of the business is whatever it is that we're actually doing. And same thing with Talent Harbor. Like, I'm not an expert recruiter. I went out and found a world-class 25-year recruiter, and we have joined forces. And so like the biggest unlock that I've had in life is like, you go out and find somebody. And if it's a matter of having the name on the side of the door, like let's say it's Johnson, well, go find I don't know, Smith. And now it's like, now on the side of the door, you still get your name on it. So you can still get that, like, it's my business, but now it's Johnson and Smith. And Smith just happens to be the guy that can help you take it from 0 to 10 million.
Yeah. Well, and I'm sure you agree, like, it doesn't even have to be a partner, like an actual equity stake partner in the business. It just needs to be like, if you're following EOS, it needs to be somebody, the visionary and the integrator have to work side by side and really make that happen.
It's challenging. So let's say it's a $300,000 business. We'll use the example. We'll say it's a $300,000 business. They want to get to 10 million. By next year, they want to be at 1 million. I'm not too deep into the margin profiles of the construction space, but I can only imagine there's not a lot of money to go around with like a $300,000 business. And so it's like, how can you afford that integrator? I agree with you. Like, visionary integrator, like yin yang, the thing is going to be like, if you can't afford it, then it probably is some type of partnership. But those are just the things you have to think about and the trade-offs as you go along. But you're right. Like, if you're using EOS and putting together your accountability chart, ultimately you're just hiring for these roles. If the resources aren't there, then sometimes equity has to come into play.
Yeah. It's so, a lot of blue collar guys are not financial experts and they don't have MBAs. I'm not either. Like, a lot of the times I hear people talking about some financial things that's over my head. And I just got to say, oh yeah. But the whole idea of like giving up equity, it sounds scary to some people. Obviously there's lots of partnerships that fail. I've had a partnership fail, but and that's just part of it. But the yin yang, like you talked about earlier, if you can find that, the energy that comes out of that is undescribable to someone who's never experienced it before. Would you agree with that?
100%. Like, yeah, like magic happens when you truly find someone where like one person brings half of the skills and the other person brings like the exact other half that's needed. Like, the energy, the solutions, like the vision, everything just starts to come together. And you just brought up an amazing point, because it cuts both ways, which is all of this is true. Everything we just said is true, which is like, if you go find the yin, the yang, like you can go and dominate in the world. If you pick the wrong person to partner with, like, none of that stuff comes true. And that's why like partnerships are so important. Understanding expectations up front, having different like off ramps along the way. All of the partners that I've ever partnered with for any of my companies, I've known for at least 10 years. So I know who they are as a human. I know that our personalities are good. I know that like they can push back, because that's another thing. Like, you don't want someone around you that's just like, oh yeah, great idea, let's go. Like, I want people around me to be like, hey dude, that's a dumb idea. And like, have you considered these things? And it's like, oh, great. But yeah, finding a partner, it's definitely not something I would say go to Craigslist for. You got to be strategic about it.
Yeah, and just to be clear, like, you're not saying you should go find a partner. You're just saying like, if you're not able to hire for positions to be able to grow your business, if you're the bottleneck, but you don't want to like, maybe that's a very, very viable option to offset the struggles that you have at whatever aspect of the business it is.
100% on the same page. Like, I think I was kind of stuck in or using the example of the much smaller business, and some things like that are prohibitive. 100% agree. Like, your first thought is like, oh man, I want to grow my business. Let me go find a partner. That shouldn't be the first thought. The first thought should be, okay, great. You want to grow your business. How big do you want to grow it? Over what is your own vision? What's the mission? Put all of these things together. And then once you have that, like, you can start to make the decisions of like, oh, all I needed this whole time was an integrator. And so I'm going to go hire a GM, and it's going to take my business to the next level. But before you really understand, like, why do you exist? What are the core behaviors that drive this organization forward? And where is this organization going to be 10 years from now? Like, it's really hard to make decisions over like, who do I need? Do I need a partner? Do I need an integrator? Do I need a salesperson? That's why a lot of pre-work is needed up front on these things.
When someone reaches out to you to get, like, say, a salesman, do you kind of look at their business and then advise them on like, you really don't need a salesman. Like, you just need a better sales process, and the owner can do that. Like, do you kind of evaluate and make sure that it's going to be a good fit?
We do. And sometimes we'll send business, because like, not everybody is ready for salespeople. Before you bring a salesperson through the door, and you just brought this up, like, there has to be a process. If the entire process is in the owner's head and that's the only place that it exists, you could go hire 10 salespeople tomorrow and nothing is going to happen, because they don't know anything. And so like, there has to be a process, a documented process ahead of going out and really looking for those salespeople. Now, you could start at a higher level. You could say, whether it's VP or director or maybe like a sales manager, you could say like, the first thing I'm going to go do is hire a sales leader or bring in a fractional salesperson to help me to take the stuff that's in my head and put it into a documented process, and then go hire salespeople, but all day long. And like what happens in the early conversations that we have is like, we can identify that and we'll say, boy, like we could really help you out in this area, but it's going to be set up to fail. So go talk to our friends over here who put together sales processes and things like that. And then just think of us like when it's all together and you're ready to roll, just don't forget our names. And that's kind of how that's how it goes.
Awesome. Well, I know you got an appointment. You got to get on. So I want to be respectful of your time, Ryan. I always ask everybody this question: what's a book that you would recommend, or one that you're currently reading?
The most helpful book, like two books that I like live and die by today. The first one is called The Lean Startup. And the reason The Lean Startup had such a monumental impact in my life is because we talked a little bit about disassociating from the product, the service, the brand, the company. And like what The Lean Startup does is really reinforces that. And it says, listen, you are not your product or your service. You are creating value for a specific audience. And when it doesn't work with that market, then you change markets and you change markets and you change markets. And once you've gone through every market with whatever solution idea you had, and nobody's still taking it, then you change the product and you go back and you rinse and repeat, because it doesn't matter. Like, every company I've ever started has looked monumentally different by the end of it. Like what we set out to do and what we actually did. Now, from a growth standpoint, like those didn't change. Like we did what we did and we set those goals and set those targets, but how we got there continued to evolve as new data points came through. So the Lean Startup is a top one for me. And then Traction had the biggest impact in my life. So like I look at the Lean Startup of like 0 to 1, because the hardest thing to do in business is find product market fit. And so like that's my 0 to 1 book. And then from 1 to 10 is Traction. So I can implement some sort of framework to help me operate my business.
Awesome. Those are both great books. I've read both of them. I just got done reading Rocket Fuel. I don't know if you've read that or not, but that's a really good overview of EOS and, the whole visionary roles. So yeah, awesome. All right. Well, Ryan, thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate you coming on, sharing your knowledge and bringing the fire, man.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it, Brad.
Awesome. Well, guys, that's the end of the show. You know where to find us. We'll put links to Ryan's business and information in the show notes. And then also you can find information about me on the show notes, or you can just go to your favorite social media platform, search for the Hammer and Grind podcast to find me there. And remember, guys, until next time, profit is not a dirty word.